And I am live. Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Book Journey Mentor Uncut. Before we start, just a few formalities. If you are watching via my YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button so that you can get more content like this. Value for you, especially if you are a budding author. If you're watching via Facebook, please click the notification bell so that you can also get more content like this as well. Say hello to everybody, whether you're watching via Facebook or via YouTube. What are you watching and who are you speaking with? My name is Daniela Bleckner. I am an author, book journey mentor, founder of a company called Conscious Dreams Publishing. We provide bespoke publishing and mentoring services to authors, legacy writers, entrepreneurs with powerful messages and stories to share with the world. Over the last 4 years, we've published over 88 books now. I've mentored over 190 authors, helping them to develop their skill set, not just in writing or book publishing, but book marketing, social media, branding, public speaking, and most importantly, confidence. I'm absolutely passionate about providing a platform for unseen, unheard authors authors, yeah, that's correct, so that they can have their voices heard and stories shared so they can educate, inspire, and empower for generations to come. I'm absolutely passionate about what I do, and I'm absolutely passionate about this show. So if you're watching for the first time, you're watching Book Journey Mentor Uncut. This is the platform where I interview authors, whether they're new, up and coming, whether they're published via Conscious Dreams Publishing or through any other means, whether they're established. It's also a platform for experts within the publishing industry to come and impart some knowledge. It's a very interactive show as well. So this really is about you getting your questions answered. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our awesome and amazing guest. His name is Daniel Stone. Daniel Stone is a self-published author. He's published through his own name. I actually met Daniel Stone on a group called Black Owned Economy. Really, really impressed when I saw him. Immediately I knew I've got to interview this guy. His book is called After Oxford, Getting In, Fitting In, and Standing Out. So let's call him into the broadcast so we can hear his story. Please show him some love. Give us your comments. Give us your hearts. Let's bring him in.
Hello, I'm in.
Hey Daniel, how you doing?
Hi, good evening, Danny.
Good evening. So without any further ado, so tell us a little bit about you and how you came to write this book.
Yes, so my name's Daniel. I was born and raised in Handsworth in Birmingham, for anyone who knows Birmingham. And I think from quite a young age was somebody who always was kind of conscious of social issues kind of happening around me. So I think that was something that was really passed on to me from my kind of parents. And I kind of joined the Labour Party when I was 15 or 16 years old. I became the voice of youth within a lot of those meetings. So I think from a young age, I was always thinking about how I could use whatever time or skills I had to make a positive difference on things happening around me. So you mentioned that my book is called After Oxford, and I suppose the book really does track that whole journey from actually what life was like growing up in kind of Birmingham, both in terms of from like an educational perspective, but also just from a perspective of me kind of getting to know myself as an individual, and then of kind of being a student at the University of Oxford and kind of what that was like. And I think for many people, I think they were really interested to kind of hear about my own experiences of actually being in Oxford. You do hear stories about certain kind of myths and secrets about being a student at the University of Oxford. So I think a lot of people was just interested in my journey and story. But I think my real motivation was probably that part after Oxford, because often people can focus on the kind of headline achievement, so getting into a place like Oxford, then you forget that actually life continues afterwards. And sometimes you're still faced with some of the challenges and issues that you had before, and some of the things that actually you learn and develop in those periods before the achievement are things that keep you kind of once you've achieved that particular thing as well. So I really wanted to focus on that bit afterwards and being honest about the kind of life that I found even as a graduate of the University of Oxford. And so I just wanted to kind of give an honest kind of overview where I kind of talk about my shortcomings as well as my successes, and I talk about just the honest life that I've been able to lead so far.
Amazing, thank you. And I love the fact that, you know, it's about transparency and authenticity, and it's, you know, a lot of people would look at that book and think it's all about, you know, the experience of being at Oxford University, and that's the kind of goal. But I think it's really important that you look at the aftermath of that and not just looking at all the successes, but, you know, the challenges, like you say. So just put us a bit in context. What do you do at the moment?
Yes, so I currently work for the University of Birmingham as a project manager, and most of my projects are focused on the university and the impact that they're having within Birmingham as a city and the kind of wider world. So again, for those of you who know Birmingham, the University of Birmingham is around 20 or so minutes away from the very centre of Birmingham. So the university has bought a building right in the heart of this city centre called the Exchange, which they're going to use to connect the university and its research with things happening in the city. So we'll have a range of teaching activities. We'll have exhibitions and ways that the public can connect with some of our research. And so actually, so my job as project manager is kind of thinking about actually the strategy and finance of how we make that project happen. So that's kind of one project I'm doing alongside others. But I'd say the good thing, I think, with the things that I'm doing at the university is that I think is that really important balance. It feels like I'm using my skills. So my degree subject was in economics and management. So it's very much thinking about finance and organization, but it's doing it in a way that for me kind of has intrinsic value. So I'm using my skills to be able to do things that for me matter in terms of being able to drive social change.
Amazing, thank you so much. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So my mother came here from Jamaica in the, she would hate me to give the date away, so I'm going to say the late 50s, early 60s even maybe. You say your grandparents came during the Windrush era. Tell us a little bit about that from, you know, what you've heard, what's been filtered down to you.
Yeah, I think for me it's always, and I think I really wanted to kind of start my book by kind of talking about them and kind of honoring that sense of legacy. Because you're right, I think for me, I think whenever I've spoken to my grandparents about it, I think the first point is always, you know, what would it have taken somebody in that situation to decide to come to a completely different country to kind of uproot their family, in some cases coming with like a suitcase and not much money, and to kind of leave behind their home and country and come to a completely different environment just must have taken just an incredible amount of bravery, leadership, but also just probably ambition and hope for what that might then mean for their families and I think that sense of them actually doing something with the hope that actually future generations would then benefit, I think is just incredible. So I think for me, there's that kind of real humbling sense of sacrifice. And then you then hear about the hardships that they faced when they got here. So yeah, those kind of signs, you know, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish kind of things, and even kind of from like an employment perspective, kind of people not having choice in terms of jobs. And I think I remember my granddad telling a story of it kind of being like getting to like the winter, and apparently in those days they would have deep winters where it would snow and snow and snow, and the snow would be this deep, and him still having to walk to work because actually he had no option and he had to provide for his family. So I think for me, I think listening to those stories and recognizing that they were here and didn't have the same opportunities, I think for me makes me incredibly humble that their decision has now allowed me to be in a place where I'm able to kind of go to a top university and have a job where I'm working from home and you can do things on computers. So I think it's just that sense of each generation, I think constantly needing to build on the foundation that previous generations have left, and really just trying to push the kind of bars, the barriers of what's possible.
That's interesting. I've got my favourite pair of earrings actually say, I'm not wearing them now, but they say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And it takes me back to the journeys that my ancestors on both sides. But on my mum's side certainly came here, the same as you, from the Caribbean and faced many hardships. And so it's an honour and a privilege to be able to achieve the things that I have, and the same for you, but that's off the backs of standing on their shoulders, they
Yes,
give us that
yes.
opportunity. So 100%. If you have just tuned in, hey Luke says my granddad was on the Windrush too. Yes, awesome. We've actually got a book that we are working on called Hear Our Voices, which includes many stories of those people who either have come here during the Windrush era, but it focuses on Black British voices. So there is actually room for a couple more contributions. So if you're interested, Daniel, let us know. And anyone else watching, just put your details down. That would be great. And Luke is involved in that project as well. So thank you so much for that. If you have just tuned in, my name is Daniela Blecknell, author, book journey mentor, founder of Conscious Dreams Publishing, interviewing the awesome and amazing Daniel Stone, author of After Oxford, fitting in and standing out. I love that rule of three there. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, what it was like growing up in Handsworth, for those who don't know Handsworth or don't know?
Yeah, so Handsworth is quite a kind of diverse, multicultural part of Birmingham. I think people often call it the Brixton of Birmingham, in that it's kind of an area where kind of quite a large Afro-Caribbean population kind of settled in Britain. And then since then, actually, you've got a real kind of mix of different people from different backgrounds. So actually, Handsworth was where my grandparents settled when they kind of came from Jamaica in the 60s, and then also my parents were both kind of born in and around Handsworth and spent most of their life in Handsworth as well. So I think for me, it's kind of the place that has kept kind of the memories of our family and my history. But so I think for me, kind of Handsworth was a kind of really interesting place. I think for people in other parts of Birmingham, it always kind of had a bit of a reputation for kind of being kind of things to do with kind of gangs and all sorts of different things. I think my response was always, like most places, if you want to find trouble, you can find it. But actually, there was
Trouble will
nothing.
find you. Yeah.
Exactly. But there was nothing kind of in my upbringing that kind of prevented me from making strong friendships. And actually, a lot of my mentors and support structures kind of came from community groups and individuals who I met in Handsworth and who were a great support to me. So I think growing up, I think like most boys, loved playing football. So I spent most of my evenings after school and probably time during school kind of playing football. But I also really loved learning. And I think I always recall my mom kind of telling the story of like the first day of school where, sometimes kids are a bit nervous and they're kind of holding on to their parents, whereas I was just like straight away into the classroom. And I think that probably just set the tone for actually my interaction with education, and that I just loved learning. I loved being curious. I loved trying to kind of develop myself as well. And I think in my book I tell I think a story around my year 5 report. And so at the time I'm about 10 years old, and I've written in my report, I love school because of the challenges I face. So I think just that mindset of actually me constantly wanting to learn and develop, and then using that as a thing that then was pushing me to just become the best Daniel that I could be.
I love that, and that says a lot about mindset, isn't it? I love school because of the challenges I face. A lot of people would say I hate school because of the challenges I face. There's two different ways to look at everything, or more than two different ways. So when you were really young, what was your dream? Did you always want to go to Oxford? Was that something in your sights?
Yeah, so to be honest, as mentioned, I think I was somebody who loved learning. But I think for a while, kind of university. So I'd probably, growing up, you kind of become more aware of university. And so probably kind of as I was going through secondary school, I kind of had university in mind without kind of having a specific university in mind, if that makes sense. So I think probably Oxford probably became a reality, or something that I was seriously considering probably after year 11, where I took my exams. I think going into my kind of GCSE year, I was predicted maybe I was quite good at maths, so I think I was maybe predicted an A star in maths. And then a combination of kind of A's and B's, maybe one or two other A stars, and then ended up coming out with 7 A stars and 3 A's. And
Say
so
that again.
7 A stars and 3 A's, he says.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
um, so I think it was then at that point that I then began to think, actually, with that set of GCSEs, I can really aim for the highest level of university. So at that point, I then started to kind of look and think seriously about Oxford as being an option without really knowing at the time what subject. So I think probably at that age, the biggest question was around what subject I might want to do. So as mentioned, I was really interested in economics, in maths, because I really loved the fact that in maths there was always a answer, like whether or not you got it the first time round, you could kind of get to an answer eventually. So I really loved maths. But then I was also somebody who was really involved in social issues. So kind of wanted to think about how I could use my mathematical skills to really make a difference. But at the time, I hadn't really come across economics as a subject. It was only when I started to read a book called Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams. I was kind of making some of these connections between some of the kind of financial and monetary reasons around kind of slavery, and actually how that then both kind of led to the establishment of slavery, but then also the eventual demise of it as well. So I think at that point, sorry, it was called
the name of the book?
It was called it was called Capitalism and Slavery.
Capitalism and Slavery. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Ladies and gents, if you're watching this, so much knowledge being poured out here and so much inspiration for young people right now. Young people, I think, get a really difficult time, bad rap. Whenever I've tried to pitch stories to the press around our young Black children doing amazing things, they don't really want to hear unless there's some kind of tragedy or problem involved. There's a lot of negativity in the paper, so please do share this out. You never know who could watch this and actually be really inspired by what Daniel was saying. So thank you so much, and thank you, Mem, I think, for sharing that out. Thank you so much. Please do invite your followers as well. This is some really great content coming out here. So you spoke a little bit about your childhood. What about your peers in Handsworth? Did they have similar aspirations to you, or were they sort of poles apart in that sense of what they wanted to achieve in life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I've kind of had probably two main friendship groups. So my parents were kind of both came from kind of Christian households. So kind of from quite a young age, we were kind of, I was going to say, brought to church, encouraged to go to church. So I think I kind of had a kind of good support structure in terms of actually through church, and actually kind of having people who through their families were kind of being pushed to both to kind of engage positively with education, but then also within our church structure, there was a thing where there were young people were being encouraged to be mentors and also to mentor other young people. So I think that was a really great community structure of actually kind of ensuring that their young people were supported and really developing their character. But then within school, I think again there was a real mix. I think especially kind of thinking particularly around some of the Black boys who I went to school with. I think there was that whole thing about it kind of being uncool to want to achieve academically and wanting to work. So even though a lot of the boys in my class were really gifted, and it weren't like they were in the bottom sets, they were like in some of the top sets. But even in those sets, it was often they weren't applying themselves or weren't doing the work that they were capable of. So I think often there was that thing around attitude, them not applying themselves in a way that they could have really. And again, there's probably at that age all sorts of different distractions and things, and I think it does take exactly. So I think it does take a certain amount of discipline for you to be able to resist a lot of those things and decide that at that age you're going to focus on work. And I think a lot of that does come back to mindset, where you will hear a lot of people saying, 20 years later, if I could go back to the time when I was at school and do it again, then I would have done things differently. And I think I kind of had that mindset from that age of thinking, I'm in the moment now, how can I maximize the opportunities I've got? And often the sad thing is that people often don't make those good choices at the time when they need to make them.
Such a great role model. I mean, I can see you definitely being in schools and inspiring so many young people as well, in terms of just being a testament to what actually taking advantage of the moment really can mean. Was there much jealousy from your peers? Did you find that you kind of drifted apart the kind of higher your aspirations went?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, to be honest, I think it probably helped the sort of character that I kind of have. So and I'd say this actually for people who are kind of given the title academically able by their school, to really kind of treat that with humility and not to use it as a thing to kind of put down other people in your class.
Yeah,
Because I have seen some people who do that, who are kind of are listed as being gifted, and then they'll put down other students, or kind of, if there's some things that they understand and others don't, they'll start using it as a chance to kind of get back at other students. Whereas I think I always really tried to have a real sense of like humility, that it wasn't about me being better than other people. And if I could help my classmates and peers, then I would to try to help them. So I think as a consequence of that, I don't think I kind of really came in for much like abuse at all. Really, I think people recognised both the level of achievement, but also how I went about doing it as well. That I wasn't like a show off with it. So I think humility, I think, is key to that, really.
brilliant. Thank you. There's a question here from Luke. He says, "Have any of you got dual citizenship?" I mean, I don't. I was born in Britain, so I've got a British passport. I don't. Daniel?
No, I don't have either, unfortunately. But to be fair, I have think like you mentioned stuff around work and other things, and I think kind of one of the big thing I'm currently thinking about actually is whether I honestly kind of see my future in the UK or elsewhere. So it might be something that I look into at some point in the near future.
Thank you,
But,
Luke.
but
That might have been a prompt.
I don't.
So did you find then, your peers and your family, were they supportive in terms of your dream of going to Oxford? Did you get any sage advice?
Yeah. So I think for quite a lot of my family, I think Oxford and higher education, and actually, to be fair, even a lot of my teachers, like Oxford, were just something that was outside of their experience. So I think my parents definitely were supportive of both myself and my kind of other siblings, kind of going to university, and really achieving in that sense. But I don't think they knew enough really about the process to be able to kind of give me specific advice.
Yeah.
So I think often, actually, I think some of the best advice I got were from kind of other teachers or mentors who kind of knew more about the system. So I remember kind of having some really great conversations with kind of people who were thinking around, who were kind of asking me about my university choices, and really helped me to kind of reflect on some of the decisions I was making at the time. And actually, one of the biggest choices I had to make was whether or not to take a gap year. So I think within my book, I talk about the fact that I actually got into Oxford at the second time of trying. So the first time I applied to do a different subject in a different college, and didn't get in. And then one of my mentors that then suggested that I kind of reject, I think, my place at the University of Warwick, and reapply. And I think at the time, I think my dad was kind of dead against me doing it. I think he was concerned that, if I was to reject the place, then I wouldn't apply to university again, and then I missed the opportunity. But I just kind of saw it as a chance to really develop more myself and see more of the world. So I got to travel to Ghana. I kind of volunteered in my community. I did all sorts of amazing things, and then ended up kind of getting in to Oxford at the second time. So I think sometimes just having people who see life from a slightly different perspective, who can help you to kind of recognize the different angles to maybe get into where you want to get to.
That's amazing. I think that's so important as well, to have people who can give you an outside perspective, different points of view. And I think certainly for me, when I didn't have a gap year because I was kind of like just drifting anyway. I was 20, so I had like a year away. I travelled. I went to Tanzania and lived there for a year. Got into voluntary teaching. It completely was character building. It opened my eyes to a different lifestyle, different culture, and I probably would never, ever would have gone into teaching if it wasn't for that experience. So, you know, traveling is just as important as education as everything else, you know, academically, you know, academic education as well. So that's amazing. Love to go to Ghana. So when you arrived at Oxford, I'm going to take a quote from your book, which is really interesting. You said, all the heads were male. So these are the statues you were talking about when you came in. You said all of the heads were male, bearing European features and an array of magnificent beards. Did this affect, this is my question, did this affect your internal dialogue? You know, we might have this kind of thought process of, do I belong here? Do I fit in here? Even sometimes, do I deserve to be here? You know, I don't look like all these statues here. Did it feel like a bit of an exclusive club?
Yes, so I'd say, so I think my starting point was the fact that I knew how hard I'd worked to kind of get there. So I knew that I'd had to achieve 4 A's at A-level. I'd, you know, gone through interviews, gone through tests, kind of done everything to kind of get there. So I think having got there, I think I just knew that I need to kind of give myself time to adjust and adapt to it. And I think you're right. I mean, going to a place like that, where actually all of the things that you see around you kind of are telling you a certain thing around actually who built the place and who it's for. So you can't ignore it. But actually, and I think you kind of mentioned the kind of book title, and I think the fitting in bit has a question mark. And I think that bit is intentional, because for me, there's that thing sometimes where, as people, we can kind of say, you know, you want to go to somewhere and you want to fit in. But I think for me, the question is, why do we place so much value on fitting in and being like everyone else? And so I think for me, there was a realization that there would be certain forms of difference between me and some, if not many, other people who were in Oxford. But I was comfortable with that. Like for me, it wasn't important for me to have to fit in. Like I was happy being perhaps slightly different, but also recognizing what I could bring to Oxford as a kind of university and as an environment.
I love that. You just make my heart sing listening to that. It's you've said quite a few really important things. It's like you have worked here, so you have earned your place regardless. And there's this whole thing of, do I have to belong? Do I have to fit in? Can't I just be me in this space? You know, that I have earned myself into, and that's powerful. It was really powerful what you just said there. And I like that it's a question mark. Does it even matter? I love that. So what kind of challenges then did you face at Oxford, and what was the most rewarding thing about the experience?
Yeah. I think actually one of the first challenges that I faced was trying to find a barber.
That's a big challenge. If you don't understand that is a big challenge. I would struggle as well.
But actually, the good thing is that there's actually quite a large Afro-Caribbean community in Oxford. Like not right in the centre, but just on the outskirts. So I maybe had to get like a 20-minute bus ride, and then I could get a nice fresh trim.
Oh, come on, 20-minute bus ride. That's nothing. I thought we were talking about hours or something.
But I think beyond that, I think probably one of the biggest things was just around the workload. And I think that is one of the kind of realities in that a place like Oxford, you are pushed academically to really produce your best work. And I guess with most other universities, there's an expectation of maybe doing, you know, a few essays a term, whereas we were doing 2 essays a week alongside other assignments and things. So I think probably the biggest adjustment was the workload, and just adapting to the pace and quality of kind of what was expected. But I think, again, I just tried to give myself time. You know, I told myself that, you know, you're not going to get everything right the first time around, or even the 10th time around. You just have to give yourself time to be able to adjust to like the pace of life. And so I think kind of what helped me throughout that period, I think we're just trying to have a number of really important anchors that kind of kept me kind of grounded in who I was. So kind of having things like the Afro-Caribbean Society, which was a group of students from African and Caribbean backgrounds. We could meet up and eat kind of jollof rice and good food and, and listen to music and do all sorts. What was really important. Still playing football within my college. So kind of having those things that kind of allow me to relax, I think were really important. And then you find that you do then catch up to the pace of things, and I was able to then throw myself into other kind of social issues, so kind of working on issues around access, which is all around helping more students from diverse backgrounds get into Oxford. I was involved in a campaign around racial awareness and equality, and then was also elected to be the president of my college as well. So I was able, once I settled, to then think about how I could use my time to really affect change in the college that I was based in.
That's brilliant. And did you find people kind of gravitated towards that, or did you find, obviously, so many different people? Did you find anyone didn't understand what you were doing? Maybe they weren't particularly, they challenged you. Maybe they were prejudiced, or did people embrace what you were trying to make them become aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, so I'd say there was kind of a mix. I think overall, I think my experience was positive. I think most people who go there kind of go to university with an open mind and are willing to learn from the experiences of others. And I think those who kind of are closed off tend to kind of stay within their own cliques anyway and don't really want to
Yeah.
associate with us. Now have their like Bullingdon Club, and gentlemen's clubs, and all those sorts of things. But I think the vast majority of people were down to earth and willing to kind of learn from each other and build friendships. And a lot of the people who I went to university are kind of still friends, and really close friends. But I think so. I think some of the change or some of the issues were probably within some of the senior leadership roles within the university. And I think initially we had a challenge trying to get them to actually recognise some of the issues around the discrimination and inequality. So I remember actually one of the kind of conversations that I had with somebody who was quite senior in the university, and I think his response was that there was no racism in Oxford. And
The kind of closed eye approach, yeah.
Exactly. And I think so thankfully we've done a report at that point called the 100 Voices Report, which had captured the experiences of 100, of about 100 BAME students. And so we were able to then present the findings of that, which actually showed some of the kind of negative experience that people had alongside some of the positives, but definitely he couldn't hide from the fact that there were still issues within the university in terms of how inclusive and open it was. So I think you're right. I think often when it comes to institutional change, there's that thing where you need to get people first and foremost to be aware and to kind of acknowledge the issue, and then to think about how together we then address it and think about change.
That's such an important point, and I think it's great you backed up what you had to say with actual hard evidence, because you can't argue with facts, you can't argue with people's experiences. And I guess it's not sad but not surprising that people in senior, you kind of think that the higher people up, the more astute or aware they should really be. But there is this, I think, disease of people who aren't affected by these issues, that allows them or gives them the privilege to close their eyes to things and pretend it doesn't exist. So it's really powerful that you did do that. Do you know what? My father actually went to Oxford University, and he did maths as well. Yes, maths. That's where he met my mum, but that's another broadcast. We'll go into that another time. So, what makes you resilient?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'd say it's a number of things. So I think I mentioned, that my kind of parents were people of faith. So I think probably having that spiritual connection for me, I think has really helped, because it kind of gives me a real sense of grounding and a sense of actually there being things that are bigger than me and bigger than things that I can necessarily understand. So I think that's helped me to kind of have a really good sense of perspective, in terms of just the significance of my life versus other things that are happening. I think kind of self-awareness, I think, is critical. I always talk about actually the skills that you need to develop as a person, and even above things like maths and writing, I think self-awareness for me is one of the most important skills that you can have, to be able to kind of take a step back from your thoughts and your actions and just think, why am I responding in this way? How could I have done that better? Why am I thinking these things? So I think for me, that's always helped me to be able to kind of keep my own thoughts and actions in perspective and then kind of improve on them. And I think it's probably also kind of then stopped me from, because so sometimes people can kind of blow certain things out of like proportion. So kind of bad things happen, and then you kind of think it's then the end of the world, and you'll never be able to recover from it. Whereas I think that sense of perspective, I think, is critical in building resilience, because then you realize actually, there's still things I can get from this experience, even if it's negative. You recognize actually the kind of person maybe who inflicted that thing must have some kind of issue going on with them. So it kind of gives you that real sense of being able to put things in compartments and then move on without it really affecting your sense of self.
Amazing. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching and if you have any questions for Daniel Stone, please throw them up. Please do invite some people. We had about 15 more minutes of this interview. He's giving some golden nuggets here. So I think what you said is really important. And I can see you, like I said, working with young people, inspiring them, empowering them, being a role model. Do you go into schools at all? Do you do any work with young people?
Yeah. I think kind of giving back and doing things with young people has always been a really important part of my journey, and something actually that I probably started while I was still a young person. So one of my mentors actually encouraged me, I think probably even from the age of 16, to kind of start doing talks, and I remember at that age thinking, well, like, I'm not even like just about finished school. What could I possibly have to kind of share or give back? But I think the fact is that kind of wherever you are in your journey, there'll always be people who maybe are a step or two behind, who can always learn from where you are. So I think probably having that sense of always thinking about how my experiences or how my life can help others, I think has probably always been something that I've been conscious of. So that I think beyond that, I do kind of, so I go kind of into schools quite often. I'm also a school governor at my former secondary school as well. So kind of helping in that sense. So I think it's really important, both for the people who you're speaking to, but then also for yourself to be able to spend time seeking to help others.
Awesome. So who's your role model? Who inspires you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think
I've got all the good questions today, Daniel.
I know you really. And I think, being completely honest, I think a lot of my role models really came from books that I was reading. So, people like, I always use like Nelson Mandela, kind of reading Long Walk to Freedom, which I just thought was just an incredible story of somebody who kind of affected real change, like in his particular place and time. But there were small things that he did. So the fact that, for example, in his prison cell, he'd be doing like push-ups and sit-ups and kind of keeping himself physically fit, to the fact of then kind of going out and kind of building relationships with the prison guards. Then, of course, when he came out of prison, seeking to kind of build forgiveness and reconciliation rather than seeking revenge. So there were people like him, kind of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, just these incredible people who I was reading about within their own particular kind of time and place, who were just incredible people. And I think that was probably one reason why I've always kind of thought about writing the sort of book that I've written, because actually I recognize the power of story in actually being able to shed light on somebody's kind of circumstance, but then also to kind of bring hope and inspiration as well.
Amazing, thank you. So what is next for you? We haven't even spoken about after Oxford. Actually, I do have a question actually. Benjamin Franklin, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I used it in my recent book. He says, change is the only thing that's constant. One's ability to adapt to change determines one's success. How far do you agree with that? And tell us about, times when you've had to be adaptable in your life.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree. And I think if anything, if we learn anything from 2020 and what we expected this year to entail, is the fact that you're completely right. I think change is something that is happening, and it actually is happening at a kind of increasing pace as well. So I kind of think back even when I was kind of young in terms of like how technology has moved on so quickly. Whereas I think there's always commentaries that kind of said, if this crisis happened even 5 or 10 years ago, how would we have the option to do things like Zooms and events like this and all sorts. So I think you're right. The kind of pace of change that we're living in, I think is kind of probably unprecedented. So I'd say in terms of my own kind of adaptability, I think you're completely right, and I think how I've tried to approach things is just really trying to develop those core sets of skills that will help me to be able to thrive no matter what's happening around me in the environment. And I mentioned kind of self-awareness kind of being one critical thing, because that then allows you to kind of look at yourself and look at the environment and kind of adapt and adjust yourself in response to that. And then I think beyond that, I think just really having a real drive to be curious and to learn and to kind of think about how much you can really kind of pull from the environment. I think that's why I've always loved reading, because I think reading really does just open up your mind to the fact that, as you say, things have historically always changed and they will always change. And actually, at this very moment, we're kind of in the cold kind of autumn winter, whereas you go to another part of the world, and they're still in their summertime and like sitting out on the beach and all sorts. So actually, even in our present time, where we're sitting down in a static place, there's change happening all around us. There's change happening inside our bodies internally, and so I think we just have to embrace all of that, and I think just become comfortable at becoming the best versions of ourselves as we can be.
Amazing, thank you. So what is next for that? No, I want to get this question in. What advice would you give to young people, especially young Black girls and boys, who have dreams and aspirations and maybe feel like, well, this isn't for me. I'm not going to fit in, or I'm the first in my family to go to university. On my mum's side, myself and my sisters were the first in the family to go to university, to get degrees. So what would you say to these young people who may be feeling like they don't deserve that success, or they can't physically see themselves in that position of being in that particular role?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the first question around whether you deserve it, you definitely do. I think, and as you said, like for people who have achieved like any form of success at any level, you would have had to have done something to get that. So you would have had to shown a certain amount of time and dedication and focus. And so actually, if you succeed and achieve something, then actually you are completely deserving of that. But I think that question of actually, as you say, kind of fitting in and being the first, I think can be difficult, and at times it can be something of a burden. Like unless you know how to embrace it and kind of see it as an important part of your identity. And I think the good thing is that we are kind of, and you kind of mentioned the kind of Black-owned kind of Facebook group and other things. There are things out there now that are designed to connect people, and I know we kind of met through kind of social media as well. And so I think there are people out there where actually, if you feel that it's becoming too much, there are people who you can reach out to kind of help you kind of carry some of that as well. And as mentioned, kind of things like mentoring, there are people who will have done what you've done, probably maybe in a different sector or a different setting, but who can provide advice and support and guidance. So I'll say, don't be afraid to kind of reach out if it feels like you want to hear or kind of find support from other parts of your community. But then I'd say beyond that, I think it's really just having that real sense of, I'm recognizing the fact that because you're the first, there will be others now who can be inspired and use you as something that's important. So hopefully that in itself will kind of give you comfort and the means to continue and go on.
Amazing. Okay, now I'm going to ask, what's next for Daniel?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd say, so at present, so as mentioned, I'm at the University of Birmingham, and engaged in like a number of really interesting projects at the university. I think I spoke about, I think when I was younger, kind of joining Labour and being involved in politics, and always kind of had that as something I was interested in, as like a means of bringing about change. But yeah, I can't handle these political parties now.
No, no.
I think it's just that sense of like, because often I think one of the frustrations that it just really is kind of separating people, and actually sometimes to solve some of the big issues, you need people to speak and kind of come together. And Labour won't have all the answers. The Conservatives might have one or two. so you kind of need that kind of coming together, really, which I just don't see happening in politics. So we'll see. But as I said, it kind of feels like I'm still learning about myself, learning about the world around me, doing work that's really developing me as a person, which I think is important as well. And so I guess we'll just have to see kind of where this goes, kind of as I come to the end of some of my projects, whether I choose to kind of stay within this particular sector, or as you say, move to Jamaica and get my dual.
You're giving him ideas. Dual heritage. Okay, we've got a couple of comments. Luke says we can all learn from each other. Yeah, thank you. Gus says, yes, love that. You are the lighthouse for the ones after you. Yes, 100%. I've got to say that you have just been an absolute delight to interview. You're such a positive person, and what I love the most about what you said is you haven't focused on the negatives. You haven't put this label on yourself as being a black man in Oxford. It's you came. You conquered. and it's the fact that what I think I've got the biggest thing I've got from this interview from you was you're fitting in, ? Does it matter? Do I need to fit in? Can I not just be me? Can I not just be present in the fact that I have earned my place here, and I'm here to be myself and to share my knowledge and my wisdom, which is just as valuable as anyone else's. I think that's such a huge takeaway, because I think we as humans, we always want to put labels on ourselves and put ourselves into categories, and I should act like this or I should be like this in order to fit into this particular group of people to please them. But actually, you've just followed your heart, and it seems from a very young age, embrace the challenges around you, and that's just a real testament to your character, I think. How can people connect with you?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I should have had to think about that. So
are you on Facebook? Do you have a website?
I'm on Instagram. I think Daniel_Stone_author. I think is my Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as well at Daniel Stone. So I'd probably say kind of probably LinkedIn or Instagram is probably the best way to reach me.
Okay, amazing, thank you. And at the end of the interview, Daniel will put up links to his books, anything that he's doing, and ways that you can contact him as well. So thank you everybody for coming in. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for your time, Daniel. You have been awesome and amazing. Please tune in for next week, where I'll be interviewing one of our authors, Innomwe Damale, who published this book with us. She publishes the first in a 6-part series, children's book, Nzinga and Being Kind. She's also recently published Nzinga and Being and Saying Goodbye. So each one focuses on a different social, what word am I looking for? A value or a social aspect, a concept. So obviously this one is about being kind. The second one is about how to deal with death and grief and loss through the loss of the class's pet rabbit. Brilliant books, beautifully illustrated, really fantastic messages. She'll be joining us next Wednesday, 7 p.m. GMT, 2 p.m. EST. Thank you so much for joining. I have been Daniela Bleckner, speaking with
Daniel Stone.
Bye.